Story 1. The Snowbound Stranger. The fire crackled in the old stone hearth, casting flickering shadows on the log cabin's walls. Kara nestled deeper into the worn leather armchair, her eyes fluttering as she fought sleep. Outside, the wind howled through the mountain passes, a blizzard engulfing the world in white chaos. This far from civilization, snowstorms weren't just common, they were expected. But this one felt different, heavier, more oppressive. She had come here for peace. After the grueling end of a toxic relationship, Kara needed space, somewhere far from people and their noise. This cabin had belonged to her grandparents, perched alone on the edge of an expansive forest. It was perfect, the isolation both comforting and terrifying. For 3 days she had lived on canned goods and melted snow, enjoying the eerie silence that surrounded her. Tonight, though, the silence was interrupted. A sudden knock at the door. Kara's heart jumped. No one should be out here, not in weather like this. She set her book down, eyes glued to the door. The knock came again, 3 loud, deliberate taps. Her breath caught in her throat. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer. She grabbed the poker from the fireplace, her only makeshift weapon, and approached the door cautiously. Slowly, she unlatched it, the cold air biting at her skin as the door swung open. A man stood on her doorstep, covered in snow from head to toe. His face was pale, almost translucent under the dim porch light, eyes wide with an unsettling intensity. His clothes were threadbare, not nearly warm enough for the weather. "Please," he rasped, his voice thin and shaky. "I'm lost. The storm, it caught me by surprise." Kara hesitated, fear prickling her skin, but the man looked near death. She couldn't leave him out there to freeze. Reluctantly, she stepped aside, and he staggered in, collapsing by the fire. "Thank you," he gasped, holding his trembling hands to the heat. Kara studied him from a distance. Something was off. His clothes looked strange, like they were from another time, another era. His boots, though scuffed, were handcrafted, and his jacket looked vintage, made of a material she'd never seen. "Where did you come from?" she asked, voice tight. I don't remember," he replied, eyes wide with confusion. "I've been wandering for so long." A chill crawled down Kara's spine, colder than the storm raging outside. The fire crackled louder, and the flames seemed to bend toward the stranger as if pulled by some unseen force. The wind outside grew fiercer, and Kara glanced toward the windows. When she turned back, the man was gone. The chair where he had sat was empty, the fire still flickering. Then she saw it, wet footprints leading across the floor toward the window. Kara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't heard him move, hadn't seen him leave. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she followed the trail. The footprints led straight to the window, and then vanished. Kara's reflection stared back at her, pale and trembling, as the wind howled outside. Story 2. Beneath the ice. The frozen lake stretched endlessly before them, a vast expanse of solid white under the pale winter moon. Ben, a thrill-seeker by nature, had dragged his friends out to the middle of nowhere for one last adventure before the new year. "I heard it's haunted," Jake said, his voice low and teasing as they walked across the ice. "People say there's something trapped under there." "A ghost fish?" Ben laughed. "Come on, man, don't tell me you're scared." "I'm not scared," Jake muttered, glancing nervously around. "I just don't like this place." Rachel and Sarah were a few paces behind, talking quietly. The group had been friends for years, and they'd done plenty of crazy things together, but this felt different. The isolation was suffocating, the cold biting into their skin despite their layers of clothing. As they reached the center of the lake, Ben dropped his bag and grinned at his friends. "Time to set up camp." Jake looked down at the ice beneath his feet. "You sure this is a good idea?" "Don't be a baby," Ben teased. "It's fine. The ice is thick." They began unpacking their gear, but as they did, an unsettling sound echoed through the night. A low, groaning creak, like the ice was shifting beneath them. Ben ignored it, but Jake froze. "Did you hear that?" "Just the wind," Ben said, though even he didn't sound convinced. They set up a small fire pit on a patch of snow-covered ice, the flames flickering weakly in the icy air. The group huddled around the fire, talking and laughing to distract themselves from the creeping sense of unease. Then it happened. A loud crack split the air like a gunshot. The ice beneath them groaned again, louder this time. Rachel screamed as a jagged line snaked across the surface of the lake, spreading toward them with terrifying speed. "Move!" Ben shouted, but it was too late. The ice beneath Jake's feet gave way, and with a horrifying splash, he disappeared into the freezing water. The others rushed to the edge of the hole, screaming his name, but the black water was silent. Suddenly a hand shot up, clawing at the edge of the ice. Jake's face surfaced, his eyes wide with terror. "Help me!" he gasped, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. Ben reached out, grabbing Jake's arm, but as he pulled, something else emerged from the water. A pale, bloated hand, clasping Jake's leg. Ben recoiled in horror as the thing in the water dragged Jake back under with inhuman strength. His scream echoed across the frozen lake, then silence. The ice sealed itself over the hole, smooth and unbroken. Story 3. The Watcher in the Pines. The cabin deep in the woods had always been a family retreat, a place where Lucy and her parents would spend holidays, far from the noise of the city. But now it was just hers. Her parents were gone, and this winter she returned alone, seeking solace in the memories of better times. The snow was thick, muffling every sound, and the trees loomed like dark sentinels around the clearing where the cabin sat. Lucy spent her days chopping wood, reading by the fire, and trying to keep the loneliness at bay. It wasn't easy. Grief clung to her like the cold. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard it. A faint sound, just outside the cabin. A rustling, like something moving through the snow. She sat up, heart pounding. It could be an animal, maybe a deer, but something about the sound unsettled her. She wrapped herself in a blanket and went to the window, peering out into the night. At first, she saw nothing but darkness. Then a figure moved between the trees. Lucy's breath caught. It was too far to make out clearly, but the shape was wrong, hunched and tall, moving with an unnatural grace. She backed away from the window, her heart racing. It had to be a trick of the light, or maybe just her imagination. The sound came again, louder this time. The rustling was closer now, just outside the door. Lucy grabbed the shotgun her father had left behind, though her hands trembled as she held it. She stood frozen, listening, her ears straining to catch every sound. The doorknob rattled. She raised the gun, her finger hovering over the trigger. The door slowly creaked open, but no one was there. Outside, the snow was undisturbed, no footprints, no sign that anything had been there at all. She stepped out cautiously, scanning the tree line. The figure she had seen earlier was gone. Then, from behind her, a whisper. "I'm here." Lucy spun around, the shotgun slipping from her hands as her eyes widened in terror. Standing in the doorway was the figure, closer now. Its face was obscured by shadows, but its eyes, they were glowing, cold and empty, staring straight at her, and in that moment, she knew she wasn't alone. Winter can be beautiful and serene, but as these stories remind us, it also holds its share of chilling secrets, lurking just beyond the safety of a warm hearth. Stay vigilant, for in the heart of the cold, you never know what might be watching, waiting to strike.